Alrighty, everybody. It's time for part 2 of Guns for Liberals, Murica. Now, previously we've talked about a number of things, but today we're going to focus less on the what's and a little bit more on the how. What to choose is one thing, but after you've made your choice, of course, there's a procedure, and that procedure is in many ways kind of opaque. It sure isn't as easy as I think you would like it to be, or I would like it to be, especially after we go through a couple of key considerations. So let's talk about how to make a do of gun, specifically the paperwork. So, in order to make a do of gun, we need to understand the tremendous complexity of the history of how all of this has come to be the way it is, as well as discussing some of the intricacies and finer points of gun ownership in the state of Illinois, because that's where we are, but also more generally abroad. And to do that, we're going to start with what you need to do. And since Illinois is one of the most difficult states to acquire a firearm in, other than Massachusetts, New York, California, and a few similar ones like New Jersey, those follow a predictable pattern. I'll let you figure out what it is. In Illinois, you need something called a FOID card, Firearm Owner's ID. That is something we're going to go over in terms of the requirements as well as how to do the application. I'm not going to go through every step or even any steps of the application because that's actually something that the Illinois State Police have plenty of documentation on, and you'll be able to go to their website and apply for that. I will, however, be giving you a preview of some of the requirements, some of the needed materials, and of course, the process of getting there. After that, we're going to talk about the 4473, which is a form that you will fill out for every purchase of a firearm. Some states are trying to make it so you have to do it for every purchase of ammunition. That's a little out of the control, but you know what? Whatever. And the NICS system, which is the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, that goes with your 4473. It's part of that process, and it is required, those two things, for every firearm transactions, whether it is at a gun show, over the counter, etc. So that may be a surprise to you that there's a system already in place where it's already a national standard, because a lot of talking points that I used to myself talk about were incorrect and out of date. So 4473 has been standard for a long time with the NICS check. All right. Now, before we can get into really understanding how things are the way they are today, we need to talk about, of course, the Second Amendment, which is the only reason that we actually can do what we're talking about. And it's important to understand the different components of it, some misconceptions, as well as how the government defines a few of these terms. So, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to stress here. The word militia, the concept of regulated, well or poorly, you choose, keep and bear. And what are arms, right? So let's talk a little bit about keep and bear. To keep, obviously, you know what that means. You have it, and that's keeping it. Pretty straightforward. To bear it. Now, that's an interesting one. Because, you know, that gets into whether it's openly carried, whether it's carried concealed, whether it's, concerns everything that can be considered something that you arm yourself with. So, for example, body armor, knives, brass knuckles, blackjacks, other things like that. Are those protected by the Second Amendment? And the answer to that question is maybe. And also, it depends. There's no clear cut answer to most of those questions. It's a little bit frustrating. And while we probably should, according to the intent of the founders, be able to keep and bear all things considered arms or accessories to those arms, they're not here right now. So we have to do our best with the government we have. All right. So the important clause here is shall not be infringed. Now that's a tricky one, right? A lot of people don't understand what that means. And they think it means that it can be infringed. But I'll point out to you some important modifiers like the word not, which is fairly clear on what that means. However, as with anything that's very clearly directly written, terms and conditions may apply, void where prohibited, etc. So let's touch base on what does a militia consist of. And according to 10 U.S. Code, subsection 246, super exciting. If you'd like to go look that up, you can feel free. A militia consists of all able-bodied males ages 17 through 45 who are citizens or intend to become citizens, and females enrolled in the National Guard are considered a part of the militia. So that means if you are between the ages of 17 and 45 and are an able-bodied male, guess what? You're in the militia whether you like it or not. That's weird, I know. But things like the draft and other stuff like that have kind of traded on this concept, and sort of toyed with, intentions of what that means, etc. But a militia consists of these things. Now, I want you to consider a few things because expressly it classifies militias in two ways. The organized militia, which consists of the National Guard and the naval militia. Now, if you're like me, you probably have never heard of the naval militia, but I mean, it sounds like a thing that should exist, I guess. I don't know. I just thought that was National Guard. So the National Guard and the naval militia are explicitly listed in 10 U.S. Code, subsection 246, as the organized militia. Now, it also lays out the unorganized militia, which includes everyone else specified up here. All able-bodied males 17 to 45 who are citizens or intend to become them, as well as females in the National Guard. So this is expressly not the National Guard or the naval militia. So if you're between the ages of 17 and 45 and you are a U.S. citizen and are able-bodied, or you intend to become a U.S. citizen, guess what? You are considered part of the militia. Now, that's probably a surprise to a lot of you. It certainly was to me. I am no longer able-bodied, but to know that for many years of my life I was able-bodied and a part of the militia, well, I certainly was not well regulated. We'll put it that way. So let's look at where today's rules and today's definitions come from. And we can go back to 1581. There's a document that spells this out in English common law, right? That is where we get a lot of this information from. But if you are a fan of history and you want to go back to 1776, George Mason wrote a document enumerating the rights of the people of the colony of Virginia. And he specified these things pretty clearly. There were many other state constitutions, etc., around that time, which specified this in more or less detail But the common themes are all able-bodied men ages 16 to 60. So, whew, you're 55, your knees are shot, your hips are about to go, your back hurts, you can't see that well. Well, if it's 1776, I guess you're going to war. Now, the important thing to know about militias is that militia members must provide their own arms. This is the part about well regulated. Okay. You must be equipped, and it probably helps to know how to shoot your own guns. All right. Now, what does well regulated mean now as compared to what it meant in 1776? I'm not sure, because there's a lot of people who were shooting at squirrels since they could walk, or maybe even before, who could shoot the flies or shoot the wings off a fly at 50 paces. And I assume there are also a lot of people who had never been around guns in their entire life, just like today, who probably couldn't shoot the broadside of a barn. I'm guessing that well regulated in most contexts means somewhere in between those two extremes, there lives a spectrum of people who are familiar with their arms or own them and are not completely incompetent, right? That's where well regulated comes into play. Now, again, there's a lot of different Supreme Court case law on these things, and the Heller and Bruin cases are two ones that are the most recent, which touch on these things. And so we have to look at these kinds of statements, like, for example, the Second Amendment, within the context of laws that existed at the time. So we could draw analogs between what the hell they were talking about back then and how that applied to people in general as understood in legal precedent of the time. I think it doesn't really make sense to try and say, what does someone living in 1776 mean about a case that happened with space lasers? Like, like, you got to look at what they knew at the time, how it applied, because you really can't speculate too much and then apply that forward. So this is what militias were. You have to provide your own arms. That is still true today, interestingly enough, because as you'll note, explicitly called out is the unorganized. Now, the National Guard, of course, is organized, very, and those munitions and weapons are supplied by the Guard, which is funded by states. So, by definition, unorganized, being, of course, everybody else, would supply their own arms. That's fun, right? So, we run into another thing here, and this is something that I wanted to address. All of this is important in understanding the forms that are coming up and understanding your rights as well as your responsibilities as a gun owner. It is unlawful in all 50 states to form and train as a private paramilitary organization. You must regulate yourself. You cannot just decide that you're going to go get together with a bunch of people and train yourselves up a militia. You can't do it. You're not allowed. But you are part of the unorganized militia if you fit the criteria we specified before. So in order to be well regulated, train, be armed. That's the point, right? You can't regulate yourself as a regiment. You can't regulate yourself. I mean, you sure can try, but I tell you, federal agents really love getting in on those things and putting people away for a long time. So the only thing you can do is regulate yourself, and that means train up, make sure you understand how to use your weapons, when to use your weapons, etc., and make sure you're armed with the best tools that are for the job at hand, right? You don't want to be walking around with a black powder rifle, as fun as they are, and I do like them, to try and solve the problems of today. It will not work. I mean, it'll work once and then you'll be toast. So now this this document right here, I put together, and I'm going to try and bring it a little closer to you. Don't really get too hung up on what all this says in specific. It is on the FAQ section of the Illinois FOID card website. We're going to talk a little bit about how the Second Amendment and the FOID interact, because there's quite a lot of controversy there, which some of you may be aware of, but I'm guessing most of you are not. Let's go through it. I'm going to go ahead and just read down this page because some of you are going to be watching on phones, and that's going to suck. All right. So, Illinois Firearm Owner ID card. Here's an overview I put together. Just grab some things that I thought were interesting. There's about 40 more questions on there that are answered. So, knock yourself out. Now, who needs a FOID card? Well, if you're watching this video and you're in Illinois and you want to own a firearm, you do. If you want to handle the firearm at a range, you do. If you want to own ammunition, you do. Okay. To legally possess firearms, ammunition, tasers, or stun guns in Illinois, and interestingly enough, switchblades, residents must have a valid FOID card issued by ISP, right? So this applies to any Illinois resident. There are some very limited, but some non-residents who can get a FOID card. Most of them are not eligible for a FOID card. So that makes it very difficult if you're a concealed carrier from another state trying to carry your gun. If you are in Indiana, you live there, you work in Illinois, whatever. Tough cookies. Now, the application fee, and this is interesting because it's an administrative fee for you to have a card where the Illinois State Police, not the federal government, will allow you to do the thing that we just enumerated over here in Amendment 2 of the Constitution of the United States of America. It costs you $10 for this card. Presumably that's for the process and the privilege of going through it. For those of you who may have heard of something called a poll tax, this might sound familiar. This is a fee that is in between you and exercising your rights. A lot of people have problems with things like voter ID. This is very much like that. You could pay this basically only online. They're not going to accept cash checks or money orders. There's also a credit card processing fee. So not only do you have the wonderful privilege of paying $10, you also get to pay $2.25 ish, I think. That's what that translates to. No, 25 cents, whatever it is, 2.25%. Here are some important eligibility requirements. I presume most of you are over 21 years old. Other states, it's 18. Others still different. If you are under 21, it is key that you have a parent or guardian who is eligible, right? Who can also own a firearm. They can't be a felon and sponsor you to have it because, gosh, what a loophole that would be. Some other key things here as we go down. You can't have a felony on your record. I don't have clarification on whether that's all felonies, violent felonies, or what. Certainly not violent felonies, but if you got a DUI, hit somebody, whatever, not sure. So you can be a drunk driver who's got a felony, and it may mean that your constitutionally guaranteed right is now taken away, despite the fact that you're not a danger to anyone anymore and you've gone through all sorts of therapy, etc. Nope, not for you. So, can have a felony, no addictions to narcotics, cannot be or has not been a mental patient in the past 5 years. It's actually quite difficult, even if it's been more than 5 years ago. You will have to appeal. They will probably instantly deny you, and you'll have to appeal it from there and get documentation from your doctors, lawyers, etc., whatever. You cannot be intellectually disabled. So you don't have the right to defend yourself in the state of Illinois if you have an intellectual disability. You cannot be developmentally disabled, whatever that means. I will leave it up to you legal scholars to find out. You can't be an unlawful alien present in the United States. That one's pretty clear. You can't be admitted under a non-immigrant visa. You know, for example, like if you are, I don't know, it doesn't matter. None of you are. You can't be subject to an existing order of protection. You can't have been convicted in the past 5 years of battery, assault, aggravated assault, violation of an order of protection, or similar things where a firearm was used or on your possession. So, like if you get in a fist fight, you hit a guy with a piece of fence or a rock or something, that's aggravated assault. It's simple assault if you don't use a weapon. But if you do that and you have a gun on you, well, guess what? You don't anymore. Now, no domestic battery, aggravated domestic battery, or, you get it, right? Misdemeanor, domestic violence, blah, 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 dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Armed Forces. You can't have renounced your citizenship. No shit. You can't be a clear and present danger to yourself. That means you are not going to, do the undoing of your mortal self, as well as you can't be intending to do violent things to other people in the community. Blah, blah, etc. Is generally a resident of Illinois. You get it, right? If you lose your gun, you have to report that within 48 hours, by the way. Now, here's one that's going to apply to a lot of you. And I actually decided that cannabis was not going to have a role in my life anymore for many reasons, despite its tremendous pain relieving and muscle relaxing qualities, because it is against federal law to possess firearms or ammunition, for that matter, while you're using a controlled substance. So if you get high, and you think that you need to protect yourself, the state of Illinois might not prosecute you, but if you commit a federal crime, a federal felony, say, for example, against a federal agent, if you understand my meaning, if you do that and you are high on a substance and they get a warrant for your blood, which they absolutely will, you may lose your right to own that firearm no matter what, right? Like that might not even go to court. That could be just something that you take in your plea deal. Right? So careful there, because they don't have to actually charge you with the crime. You just have to get popped for it, right? So when you are applying for this, there's a couple of things you're going to need: your full legal name, which I presume you know, your date of birth, street address, driver's license or state ID card number, a color photograph, like a passport photo is a really good idea. Head and shoulders, blah, 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 directly head on. It's going to look like your driver's license. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. So you might want to take that, with a white background or something kind of neutral behind you, etc. And you know what? You can upload that to the Illinois State Police portal. So this is always subject to change. They arbitrarily change this stuff without revising law. It is policy in many cases. So isp.illinois.gov, that's where you can go. All right. Now that that mouthful of shit's out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the 4473. Okay. The United States Department of Justice, the bat fee, or as you may have heard of it, the ATF. Okay, on this form, you are going to fill out several things and you're going to do them accurately, because if at some point the government decides that they want to come after you for something, anything that you check or put on here that's even moderately wrong is going to count as a federal charge against you for falsifying information or lying on an official form. So this is like dead serious, no goofing around. Get it right. Okay. So you're going to fill this out. Well, actually, you and the seller of the weapon are going to fill this out, right? typically they fill in this part because nobody's expected to know, like, it's a pistol or whatever, right? Handgun, pistol, lower receiver, whatever. So in this case, I just arbitrarily chose Glock 19X with the serial number, caliber, etc. How many? Just the one, right? So you can see here, Ronald Peniston Butkus of 123 Main Street in Bozeman, zip code 69420 in the county of Turdby, was born in Bozeman, Montana. So they have his full name, his address, right? He resides in the city limits. If you reside outside, you'd say no. Your zip, your county, your sex, not your gender, your sex, your weight. You're a hefty boy. He's 6'20", right? Where you were born, what the birth date was. And this is optional, but I'm going to tell you it speeds things along, and that's how they get you, is your social. And then you're going to go through, say, are you a United States citizen? Typically, you're going to check yes, I would expect. And then all of these other things. So, for example, this question here asks you, hey, are you buying this so that you can give it or sell it to someone else? If you check no, it's game over. Guess what? You're not getting that gun. That is called a straw purchase. So you check yes. Why would anyone check no? Well, some people are tremendously stupid. But if you do check yes, and of course you do that, then of course they can get you for one count of, lying on a federal form. That's the idea. This is a gotcha. It's not really for any other reason than to bring up extra charges to pressure you into something later on if they decide that they want to. So don't get too worked up about it. It probably won't happen to you. And if it does, I don't know, maybe. Right. Have you done any felonies? Did you get, dishonorable discharge under UCMJ? Blah, blah, blah. Right. You get the idea. The 7 pages, it's not actually much for you to fill out because most of it's for the dealer. All right. And then you got to go through and answer these questions, right? Like, are you an unlawful user of? Now, this is federal, mind you. So any user of marijuana is an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana. So any user of that, right? Because it's unlawful federally. So if you check no and you're using it and you get busted, that's one more count of lying on a federal form. This is how they get you. It's tricky. So the state of Illinois may not prosecute you, but at some point, some things are federal felonies. You'll go to federal court and you'll get nailed. All right. Have you been adjudicated as a mental defective? Well, okay. No, hopefully not if you're filling out this form. I don't know what a mental defective really means or any of that stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Are you an alien or illegally or unlawfully in the United States? You renounce your citizenship. All those other things we discussed before, right? And then what we're going to do here is sign, put the date. Dealer fills out the rest of this stuff. If you had to come back and finish this later, I don't remember if in Illinois the waiting period is 3 days or 5 days, but from the point where you purchase it and submit your driver's license, typically it's at least 3. Now, the rest of this stuff I would encourage you to read at your leisure because it's how they're going to get you, how to fill out the form, where it goes, who can search it, what's done with the information, what's the purpose of the information, right, etc. You get the idea. So now with all this information, the serial number, your height, age, weight, all the information about where you were born, what year, etc., where you live is on this form, right? The 4473 and the NICS system, which is an instant. Sometimes it takes like 2 weeks. Criminal background check system, which happens simultaneously. It's not a database, right? Not a database of your personal identification and firearm purchase details. It's simply a form that has all of your personal identification information and your gun purchases. That's it. Remember, so it's not this, it's this, right? It's definitely not a database. Okay. So don't worry, because even though all of them have to be digitized and are in one central place on a PDF, they disabled the search function in Adobe Acrobat. So they can't search this document, which consists of all of the forms from everyone buying guns everywhere in the United States, because that would be illegal. That would be a database. They're just all in one place, digitized in a PDF for people to look through digitally from one central source of information. Not a database, okay? Remember that. So, to conclude, go back to my title. Second Amendment is for you. It's for me. There's a lot of people it should be for who are denied their inalienable right, which shall not be infringed by the government, but is anyway. That's the reality of the world we live in, right? We talked about what a militia is. We talked about what well-regulated is. We talked about what that meant back when this was all written down and made the law of the land. And we've talked about all the things that you need to do in the state of Illinois to get your firearm owner ID card so that you can go to the range and shoot guns or own ammunition or purchase a gun. Right? This is all before all of that's happened, right? There's more paperwork still afterwards. And then we talked about the 4473 and the NICS system and how those have existed for a long time, despite people saying we need more background checks and a standardized national system, because it already exists. And that's why you get yelled at when you suggest it online, because it's a silly thing to say, because it's already happening. The gun show loophole never existed. I'm just going to put it that way. Paperwork's always been required there. It's not 1966 anymore, right? So, Guns for Liberals, Murica, Part 2, in the can. Next time, we're going to be talking about what to do, how to approach, what to think about when you go to the range. After that, we're going to talk about, have you ever been punched in the face? That's an important one. So stay tuned for those. Until then, take care. Be square.